subject today is Workers' Compensation 101. This is one of those kind of frustrating subjects. It seems like if you're managing this subject, it can be a big challenge. Years ago, when I came out of college, I went into a company, went to work, and we had literally thousands of workers' compensation claims, and it was a nightmare. We had millions of dollars on the books. And we were really drowning in managing these cases, and so we had to quickly come up with some strategies to be able to manage this, to keep the company afloat, and also, and most importantly, to get our people healthy, to get them back to work, back to being productive employees, and so as we start off this webinar today, I really went back to that. What were those simple strategies, the simple things, so it's not hyper complicated. The average person probably doesn't know or doesn't care about the intricacies of insurance claims and all of that. So we wanted to really boil this down to the 101 presentation. I'm a manager, I'm a supervisor, I'm an HR person, and I've got to handle workers' compensation. How do I do that? And that's really what this is about. How many of you noticed anything about this picture? I just noticed that. Doug, what do you notice about this picture? Brent, you got anything for me?
Nothing jumping out really.
Oh man. Oh man.
No blood.
No gloves. No gloves. All right.
Staged picture.
Maybe so. All right. I just got to make sure those guys don't get too much into REM sleep. All right. Our goal today is to help you as a manager reduce your injuries. Overall, that's really our job, is to help you prevent those injuries. But once they happen, we need to effectively manage those. So we want to keep workers healthy. We want to get them back to work. At the end of the day, money's a big part of it as well. And we'll talk about how money figures into this, how your EMOD is kind of calculated. We won't get into too much detail on that, but how does that affect your premiums? So let's dive into that. All right. So just some basics of workers' compensation. Workers' compensation insurance is a little bit different than other types of insurance. This is a mandated coverage. If you have employees, you're mandated to have workers' compensation coverage. It's protection for injured workers. It's developed over about the last 100 years and into its current form. It's mandatory. It's the exclusive remedy. What does that mean? Well, that's legalese, basically meaning that this is how you take care of a situation where an employee is injured on the job. This is how we work it out. It's a no-fault situation. You don't have to establish that somebody is at fault to have to pay this off. If a worker does something dumb, I had a claim one time. A lady broke her tailbone. I shouldn't go into this one. She broke her tailbone, and we asked her all kinds of questions.
But here you go anyway.
I did anyway. I will. It was a restroom injury. She'd been standing on top of the toilet, and she fell and broke her tailbone.
She didn't want to have her feet on the floor.
She didn't want to. She didn't want to sit.
She put her bottom on the seat.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go into too much detail, Doug. But
well, now you start this story, and all the wheels turn, and you got to figure this one out.
Yeah. Anyway, she fell and she broke her tailbone. Well, is the company at fault for that? Well, no. She made a decision there. However, it was done during the course and scope of her work. And it ended up being a workers' comp injury.
She needed a reasonable accommodation there.
Yes. This is going downhill fast, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
So this is the exclusive remedy. There's some good things and bad things about that. Sometimes we pay claims like a broken tailbone, toilet injury. But there's also things, we don't have the exorbitant high cost of a general liability claim where you can bring in attorneys and things can get exceptionally costly. So in most cases, we do like to, it's preferential to be involved in the workers' compensation world because it's statutory. How all of this compensation works is the subject of law. And so there's not a lot of guessing on this. The law says this is how it's done. Now, can attorneys get involved? Yeah, they can, but in general, there's not a great profit margin or profit incentive for a workers' compensation attorney. Normally, the attorneys only get involved when they're a bad attorney that doesn't know any better, or there's been some sort of trying to decide the best term. There's an accusation that the employer has not done things appropriately. In most cases, this should be taken care of with the adjusters. And so people that run out and get an attorney, that's a pretty bad decision. That will actually, at the end of things, just come out of their final settlement. There's not a lot to be gained by an employee getting an attorney in workers' compensation because it's a statutory. This is how it works. Okay. All right. And guys, if I missed something, go ahead and chime in, or if it's not as clear as it should be, or if I need to put a little more detail into describing a claim. So, some basics of workers compensation. Who is covered? Well, in Utah, we have written into our workers' compensation laws, we bring volunteers in. Because Utah is a heavily volunteer-oriented state, and also partially because of the Olympics, because we had 30,000 plus volunteers going to work for the Olympics, we've really expanded the scope of workers' compensation to cover volunteers. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a great thing, because we have coverage to help those volunteers. It's not looked on as a general liability claim that could really end up costing more and be more of a pain to work out. So it's a good thing. What about what types of volunteers are covered? I'll go into a little more detail in a second. All volunteers are covered as long as they are designated as an approved volunteer by your chief executive or their designee. So in a city, it'd be the mayor. In other organizations, it could be a director, a council, county council, executive, various different chief executive positions there, or their designee. And we have them on a list. These people are approved volunteers, such as search and rescue. People who are helping at the animal shelter or whatever location that they may be, they get different levels of coverage based on the scope of work that they're doing. Okay, we ask in here, what is covered? It's for people working in the course and scope of their employment. Well, does that mean that if somebody slips and falls in the parking lot while they're walking into the building, that's going to be covered? Is that in the course and scope of their employment? Yeah, we're probably going to end up paying for that one under workers' compensation. Once again, that's probably better than dealing with it under general liability anyway. Okay? And also, re-aggravation of certain injuries can also be covered under workers' compensation. And the legalese that they use on that is, did it significantly contribute to the re-aggravation? So I've got an old back injury that's been hanging around. I may have even had surgery or something like that. And I went in and my job duties significantly contributed to it. I was lifting something and I twisted, or something fell on me and it caused a re-aggravation of that injury. Are we going to be on the hook for that? Good chance that we'll be on the hook for that re-aggravation. Maybe not the whole injury, that would be apportioned out, but we would have that re-aggravation part. Okay, that's just a little sideline there. That's why, as we're qualifying people to do certain jobs, we need to ask questions about their ability. Ask them, can you perform? Have good detailed job descriptions, and go through that with them. the requirements of this job is you have to lift up to 50 pounds repeatedly throughout your shift. Can you perform these tasks? If somebody lies to you and they've got things like that, well, then we can deal with that later, but we need to ask those questions and ensure that people can adequately do the positions that we're hiring them for. Okay. Once again, folks, if you've got questions, type those into the chat box or the Q&A box. I'm just glancing over, don't see anything there. All right. So work comp basics covers medical care. The actual care that a doctor or other healthcare provider gives, prescriptions, mileage to go to appointments is also covered under this workers' comp coverage. In some situations, wages are also covered. If it's a lost time case where they lose time away from work, that can be covered as well. Now, on volunteers, this is where we kind of have a dividing line. People who are involved in public safety, law enforcement, fire, EMS, and search and rescue folks receive wages. They receive the indemnity benefits. Whereas people who are maybe volunteering at the animal shelter or at the park or whatever, maybe the Parks and Recreation program, those folks do not qualify for lost wages under current workers' compensation law. These wages are divided out based on the person's, what the effect of the injury is. We have temporary total disability. That means I'm taken off of work. I can't do anything. But it's temporary. Temporary partial disability. This is where somebody has some restrictions that won't allow them to do their whole job. Maybe. It just kind of depends on their job description. Once again, going back to those accurate job descriptions. Temporary or permanent total disability. Somebody loses their ability to work, and it's a permanent case. Or permanent partial disability. Somebody loses an eye, or they lose a significant portion of their ability to perform tasks. We may pay out a settlement for that impairment. They'll get a rating that has a percentage of their body impairment. So if I have a 5% impairment rating, then there's a bunch of calculations that goes into how old I am, how many benefits, how many dependents I have, and all of these things, and there'd be a settlement that comes from that. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm just seeing a question here. Are breaks and lunch covered? For example, if an employee is playing frisbee on a lunch break and gets injured, or basketball, or something else like that. And that's a really good question. And the answer is depends. It depends. Are they on the clock? How are they released from their workplace? There's a lot that goes into is it covered or not. However, we should go about looking at all of these situations as if we might end up having to pay for this. So, am I going to be the killjoy? My kids call me the fun sucker. Yes. Should you not have a basketball hoop? Yeah, I would recommend not having a basketball hoop and not allowing contact sports on breaks during your breaks and lunch time. If people want to leave the premises and go do some things, that's their own business. But we don't want to be in the business of providing opportunities for people to get injured. It's one thing to have some entertainment during lunchtime, but if we're putting things out there that will really contribute to those injuries, I would look and see if we can provide something else that would still be entertaining, but not provide those opportunities to hurt themselves. Okay. So I hate to be a little bit vague on that, but that's kind of how it is, because there's a lot that goes into a claim to determine whether it is compensable or not. All right, so we talked about lost time or indemnity claims. This means we're going to be paying out benefits for those lost dollars. And when they get a check for workers' compensation indemnity coverage there, it will be 2/3 of their average wages, 66 2/3%. And people freak out about this and say, well, you know, how are they going to live? How are they going to survive on 2/3 of their wages? Well, the answer is that these wages, or this compensation, is tax-free. And so basically, when you figure it all out, at the end of the day, it's about a wash. The employee probably receives almost the exact same amount of compensation as they did otherwise. And so really be careful of the temptation to make up the difference. Some of our members in the past have thought, well, you know, we need to take care of this employee, make them whole by making up the difference. That's really not the case. You're actually overpaying them. You're compensating them to not be at work. And the downside to this is if you were getting paid a lot more money, 1/3 more, to stay home, how quick would you come back to work? And it would I'd probably stay home a long time if I could get paid more to sit on the couch. So don't be tempted into doing that. This is one of those real traps that are out there. Avoid making up the difference, overcompensating those employees. Don't see any questions on that. Let's take a look at the next thing. All right, so let's look at workers' compensation premium. I threw this in at this point to just talk about how you're affected, how your premiums are affected, how they're calculated. It really comes down to your payroll, how many dollars in payroll, the hours that people work, and then what jobs they're doing, the classification codes. So some of you are having some audits right now to just verify that we've got everybody classified in the right codes. These are from the NCCI, which is a national bureau that standardizes these things. Those codes determine determine how much you pay for every dollar of payroll to cover your workers' compensation. Okay. And they vary from year to year. They'll go up and down, just depending on the experience nationwide of people working in similar type of jobs. And just on those class codes, you think about somebody that works in a position like me. I sit at a desk. Well, and I might not be a great example because I spend a lot of time on the road. But say I'm an office worker. I sit at a desk all day long. My chance of getting injured, and especially getting injured seriously, is much lower than somebody who's a firefighter or a police officer or a public works employee. They're expected to have more injuries and more serious injuries than somebody who does a pretty sedentary job like me, not a super active job. Other things that go into a workers' compensation premium: schedule rating. That's kind of the nuance of things. So there's some adjustments that can be made basically to balance out big swings. The EMOD, the experience modification rating here. Let's dive into this next one. The EMOD is the evil moth of death. Evil moth of dead. Yeah. Your EMOD is your experience modification factor, and what this is an overall ranking of how you do, what your losses are compared to other organizations with similar types of exposures, workers doing similar types of tasks. It covers the first 3 of the last 4 years. And really what this is a way to balance out your premium over years. So you may have one giant claim or several giant claims, and then you don't have any. It balances out over those years. So it has a long memory. Whether it's good or bad. If I haven't had a claim for 4 years, it's great. My EMOD is going to hang on for a long time, and I'm not going to pay a ton more, even if I do have a bad injury. Okay, it's really based on class codes. We do these audits to try to help out, knowing, or so we can underwrite appropriately knowing what type of tasks people are doing. If we've got people that are in the wrong class code, if you've got employees misclassified, problem with that is you might pay less in premium to start with, but there's an expectation that they'll have fewer injuries, and so when they do have more injuries, then your EMOD is going to suffer, and so in the long run, it ends up being far worse. So we want to make sure all of your employees are classified in the right codes, because we have expected losses over a certain year based on a class code and the number of dollars in payroll. We would expect X number of losses, number of dollars, as well as number of individual claims, and all that goes into the EMOD. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but basically the gist of the EMOD is that medical-only injuries don't hurt nearly as much. They don't count nearly as much as indemnity claims when people lose time. And so that's really where our focus needs to be, is on the indemnity claim, those lost time claims. All right. So I've got a question here. Does that tax-free benefit hurt you at the end of the year? Doug's our resident tax expert on this. So the tax-free...
And I've drawn on, I actually had a workers' comp claim once years ago. And the answer to that is no. It is tax-free. That 66 2/3%. It doesn't impact your income tax. In fact, if it should come out pretty much as a wash, because it is less of a actual pay than your normal paycheck. But what you bring home is about the same, and you're not going to pay tax on it. So, yeah, it doesn't really create any problems at the end of the year.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate that answer. So once again, though, going back to it's the indemnity claim, the lost time claims are the ones that really affect your EMOD and will affect your premium for years into the future. So that's where our focus needs to be, and that's really what the takeaway of this today is how we manage these things. Okay. So how do you control your workers' comp costs? Well, number one, have an active safety program. Prevent the injury first, and that is the very, very best way of managing it. If it didn't happen, you've got no cost that's going into it. So for every dollar that you spend on safety, you're going to save multiple dollars on those claims that happen down the road. So manage your program. Look at your claims. You've really got to be aware of what's going on and manage those every day. I know it's easy to just say, well, we've got claims adjusters that are looking at that. That's great, and our claims adjusters do a great job, but you are really the boots on the ground. You know the employee, you know the direction, you really know what their job is, and so you need to actively manage those things. Once again, focus on those big hitters, those lost time claims. Get people back to work as soon as we reasonably can, to maximize their effectiveness. All right, so we want to talk about a return to work program. You say, what is it? Well, it's really getting an injured employee back to work as soon as we possibly can. Now, at this point, I want to just clarify something, that we're talking about work-related injuries. These are not an injury that is non-work related. I have gallbladder surgery, and the doctor says I have some restrictions. I can't do certain things at work. That's your decision whether you want to accommodate those. I encourage you to have a kind of a comprehensive program on that, so you know what you're going to do when your best employee comes in and says, I have these type of restrictions for a non-work related. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a work-related workers' compensation injury. And so don't try to mix those up. When I talk about getting people back to work, I'm specifically talking about workers' compensation injuries. Okay. So you ask, why do I want an injured employee back? How do I implement this program? Let's dive in and look at it. Let's see.
Jason, we got a question there.
Okay, let me look at that.
Q&A box.
When you say indemnity, does that also include claims that have not been lost time but did get some some type of disability or more intensive investigations to prove compensation, like IME. Yeah, Brody, that's right. So indemnity is a little bit broader than that. Sometimes it's a more complicated claim. I use that as in kind of a general term to cover the more complex claims. But in general, what we're looking at is an injury that is serious enough that somebody will lose time away from work. Okay. But yeah, absolutely, it's like an IME. All right. So what's a return to work program? This is a program to return the employee back to work as soon as medically reasonable. And what reasonable is the subject of interpretation, but the goal should be we want to get this person back as soon as possible, okay? Even if they have restrictions. Some places we've had said, you know what, I don't want this person back until they're at 100% at capability, and I think that's really short-sighted to have that part of the, or to have that in our mindset. The reality is most of these restrictions can be accommodated fairly easily within existing jobs that are available, and at the end of the day, we win by getting that employee back. One, the employee is able to return to gainful employment quicker. They are, these employees have skills and knowledge that they need to be able to share. It is a good thing all around. All right, let's look ahead here a little bit. So why return to work? Productivity. At the end of the day, that employee that's experienced and knows how to do the job is going to be far more productive than bringing in a temp worker or trying to spread that person's responsibilities out among other people. Employee morale, it's tough on not only the employee who's been injured. They feel that, it's a hard thing to be injured. I feel like I let people down. That's not really the case, but that could be the feeling. I let people down. I'm not there to do my job. Let's let them know that they're an active part of our workforce and try to get them back to work. Money, of course, is definitely a reason. If the longer that person is off, the more that's going to affect your EMOD. The more of those lost time claims that you have, the more that your EMOD will be affected, and the more that it will affect your premium. And just one thing, we'll put a plug in for the Trust Accountability Program, which we're getting close to the end of the year. So everybody, make sure you finish up those applications and send those in so we can send you a check out and get you some more discounting on your work comp premium. Anyway, that's a requirement, is to have a return to work program, and we've got a boilerplate that we'll send out. Most of you received those before, but we'll send that out again to take a look at that. And I already talked about this. This is for work comp only. It's really up to you to determine how you're going to handle non-work related injuries. But it's a good time as you're doing your return to work program to maybe think about that. When do we want to accommodate? Do we want to accommodate those non-work related injuries, and how do we go about doing that? All right. Just another thought on bringing people back. Statistics show that only 5 to 10% of injured workers need more than 1 or 2 days off after an injury. There's a 3-day statutory limit before we have to start paying those lost time benefits. 24% of people are off more than 1 to 2 days. So just in those two statistics, we find that a lot of people are spending a lot more time off than they need to have. That's costing us all money. That costs our individual organization money, because our EMOD goes up and subsequently our premiums go up, but it costs us all in the pool, in the trust, because as this happens on a broad scale, that bumps up all of our costs. All right. So statistics show 60 to 80% of injuries involve unnecessary time off. Okay, how much does it cost you? Well, if you have for a small organization, an EMOD, a single lost time case for a smaller organization can have a major effect on your EMOD. If a claim bumps your EMOD from 1 up to 1.33, that's going to increase your premium by 1/3, and over the 3 years that claim is there, it will cost you an additional premium. So that's a significant amount of money. So just if we look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, it's really important to bring this back. And I actually skipped one section talking about the EMOD. When we talk about that, the EMOD is a number somewhere between 0 and about 2. Normally, it's going to hover right about 1. That compares you to other similar organizations. If my EMOD is 1.25, I'm going to pay 25% more premium than the average organization. If my EMOD is 0.75, then I'll pay that much less than the average organization. So you can ask us a question and find out what your EMOD is, and we'll be happy to share that if you don't know. But that really gives you an indication of how you're performing. If I'm over 1, I'm not doing so well. If I'm under 1, I'm doing pretty darn well. All right, here's some hidden costs of when an employee's off work. Who does the employee's job? So we have lost productivity, overtime maybe. We're bringing in people to do this job. We have to retrain people, and we know how big of a challenge that can be. And sometimes we've got to fix damage from inexperience or problems that come up from that. Sometimes we have to add extra supervision for those replacement employees. And at the end of the day, we aren't controlling our destiny. Let's work on getting the employee back, so then we can control what happens. All right, we win when we return people to work. Okay, we keep the people that have the experience there. And we get tasks done. There are a lot of tasks out there that an employee can do even with certain restrictions. If it's one-arm work, there are plenty of tasks and jobs out there that we can do within the scope of those restrictions. We talked about EMOD benefits, and here's one thing that is hard to really quantify, but working employees get better faster. If I'm on the job and I'm out there going along, I want to be productive. I don't want to have those restrictions. And many times we'll have employees, hey, can I go to my doctor appointment? Can I get an earlier doctor appointment? Because I think I'm ready to get back to work and get off these restrictions. And a lot of times they go back and the doc says, yeah, you're good to go. So these are all good things. All right, so let's talk about return to work program. You say, hey, this is Workers' Comp 101. Here's the program. We talk about return to work, but this is how I talked at the first of the presentation about what I did to manage thousands of cases and bring those to completion, and do it in a reasonable frame of time, without too much superfluous stuff going on. Well, here's the program. We designed it so it would be on one page and would be really simple. Just a boilerplate. We'll send this out with the materials later in the day, or as soon as the recording is posted up. It's designed to be really quick implementation and get fast results. So let's dive through each of the sections. One is just a policy. This says here's what we're committed to. We're committed to provide a safe, let me read this, is committed to, put your organization's name in, is committed to provide a safe work environment to our employees. But if an employee becomes injured on the job, we will do everything we can to help the employee heal and return to work as quickly as possible. When employees are able to work and be a contributing team member, the injured employee heals faster, we are more productive, and the morale of our entire organization is lifted. And you can change this however you want, but it's just a mission statement. This is what we're trying to accomplish. All right. We also need to designate a workers' compensation coordinator. Who is the person that is responsible at directing the program? Everybody needs to be involved, particularly the supervisors. And this is a person that they can go to for help. This would be probably the person that is calling in the claims or sending those in over the internet. that has regular interaction with the adjusters, but designate somebody as the coordinator. All right. And then a simple statement in there about what do you do when an injury occurs. Number one, provide aid. If it's a 911 injury, call 911 and get them there. Also want to look at first responders. Do we train people? You know, Doug does a great course on first aid and CPR. Have people there that can provide first aid, and also have have first aid facilities available as well. Then, if it's not a 911 injury or emergency, we want to take that employee to a designated clinic. Physically getting them there. Sometimes employees don't make it there. The other side of it is, if somebody's injured, we don't want to put them in a car and say, yeah, just drive up to the clinic. When they look down and they see the blood soaking through the bandage on their hand, and they pass out and crash. That's a bad way to go. So we want to. This is time for all hands on deck, and we help that employee get to the clinic. We want to have an injury packet available at that time. This is really responsibility of the supervisor to grab this and get it ready when the employee's injured. So that injury packet should have the employee's first report of injury, and we'll send out a boilerplate on each one of these with the materials today. So a first report of injury. This is where the employee writes down this is what happened in this injury. We also have, along with that, the supervisor incident investigation report. It's similar to the first report of injury, but it's the supervisor's take on that and the investigation that they did to determine why did this happen and determine what's going to be done to prevent it from happening again. Okay. Also, we want to have in there a physician request for return to work, and you can do this on an official basis maybe once. It's always good to have this as part of a packet so the doc knows that we accommodate light duty. We will come up with job duties that will match the restrictions that the doctor is able to provide. We're going to work together, and if we let the docs at the clinic know that commitment, they're going to look for restrictions. If we've made it clear that we don't want this person back until they're 100%, they're just going to take them off work, and it's going to cost us a lot of money and productivity and all those things. And then a job description. Having a list of job descriptions is important, because that doc, when they're looking at assigning restrictions and what will work out for this injury, if they have an idea what the job is, that makes it much more easy to provide good restrictions. I've had situations where it just seemed that the doctor was being very difficult about the restrictions, and I ended up sending the doctor a video clip of here is the task, and this was production work, so it was the same task over and over again. This is what this person does, and emailed that to the doc, and the doc responded, "Oh, I didn't realize that. The employee told me something very different from what that is. Now I know that this this is well within the restrictions that I have. I don't have any issue with the employee doing this task at all." Callie says, "I'm glad we don't employ any matadors." Yeah, me too. That's bad risk. Bad risk. All right, we are in the state of Utah, and that's great. Workers' compensation law is a state function. And from state to state, some states are awesome on work comp, and Utah is one of the best in the nation, and some are terrible. And I've worked in some of those states, and it's a disaster. So take advantage of this. Don't throw away your rights that you have in Utah. In Utah, we can direct care. What does that mean? That means I can send my employees, if it's, like I said, if it's a 911 injury, you call the ambulance, call 911, they'll haul them to a hospital. We don't have a choice in that matter. We get them the appropriate care. But if I've got a wrist that's really kind of bugging me, don't allow that employee to just go out and determine where they end up. There are a lot of problems that can come from that. One of which is a lot of primary care providers don't have a clue about workers' compensation. They don't have a clue about giving appropriate restrictions, and they may give you they may take this employee off work for a month. And if you went to a reasonable physician, they might say, oh, here's some restrictions. They can come back to work today. So send them to a provider that you designate. Direct your care. Put this in your policy. And we did send out this boilerplate policy to everybody that was kind of a general. We looked at a regional area, and if you're in southern Davis County, here's the clinic that we think works. That doesn't mean you have to go with that clinic, but it's just a starting point. Designate this clinic and hold your employees to that. Here's the rule. If they decide to go out on their own, can you discipline them? Yeah, you can write them up for going outside of your policy, but you've got to have it in your policy, and you've got to train them on it. So which clinic do you go to? We generally like to go with network providers because we have agreements with them to get better pricing out of that. We also know the providers. We also know that they are familiar with workers' compensation. They're familiar with industrial type injuries. They are also providers that will question the questionable stuff. So they're going to, if something seems a little fishy, they'll question that, and they may give us a call and say, here's what the employee is telling me. Is that right? And if we've got a good relationship, it can work really well. Okay. We do have the website. This will go through Travelers. We use them for our third-party administration, and they will. And so there's a website where you can go and find those network providers, mywcinfo.com, and you can find those in your area. Let's see. So injury reporting. This is an essential part of our work comp program, is requiring reporting of all injuries, no matter how minor. That is an essential part of having a good program. If we don't hear about it, it can get out of control. So the timing, we should have in our policy that says if an employee is injured, they need to immediately report that to their supervisor. Okay. Beyond that, management should report all workers' comp claims within 24 hours. I say same shift is really when we should have that. You shouldn't finish the day without calling up, and I realize sometimes you can have second and third shifts, and the work comp coordinator may not be in, but an email works, a phone call works. This injury happened. Get those in within 24 hours. So why does it matter if we have a lag time? And let me show you. Let me show you a graph here. And what we see in this center graph is the time it takes between the employee being injured and them reporting to you. And these, the blue, yellow, and red sections there are times when we go beyond 4 days out to 11 plus days if it's red. That's pretty infrequent. 89% of the time, it's within 0 to 3 days we hear about that. The problem is, from there to the time that our adjusters are notified, that time goes down to almost 50% of the time within that 0 to 3 days. Why does that matter? Well, the longer the time takes between the injury happening and it being reported to adjusters, the more that claim is going to cost. That's just statistics how it works, because bad outcomes can happen during that time. And so we want to report those and get on those as soon as possible. What about $0 claims? Do we report things like that? And we definitely encourage you, if you have something, this may be something in the future, go ahead and report that, even if there's not medical attention given, if it's a blood exposure claim or something like that, where police officer takes down a bad guy, When he's done, he looks down. I've got some blood on my skin, but it's, you know, it didn't affect an open wound or anything like that. I want to report this and make sure if I ever get hepatitis, I've reported this situation. Anyway, so that's important to report those. I also want to watch out for fraud. If something doesn't make a lot of sense, if it seems pretty fishy, just tell the adjusters when you call in that claim or you report it online, this is a red flag claim. There's something fishy about this, or I know this is a false claim because there were 5 people there when the employee said this happened and it didn't happen, or they falsified it. I had a situation years ago where one of our employees had blown his knee out over the weekend doing some recreational activity, and he had his friends carry him into the workplace on Monday morning, lay him down on the floor, and throw some parts around him to stage this accident that happened. Unfortunately for the employee, we had security camera footage showing them his friends carrying him into the workplace, and that claim was denied. We hope that doesn't happen in our organizations, but we know occasionally it does. Employees can be prosecuted for this. This is fraud, and in recent years there have been some pretty aggressive stances taken on that. But all you have to do is let our adjusters know, hey, there's an issue with this claim. It's a red flag, and any detail that you can provide there. Okay. All right. So post-injury treatment. Once this employee has been to the doctor, the paperwork, the doctor will give some return to work paperwork, because it's a workers' compensation claim, should provide that to the supervisor. The supervisor should give a copy of that to the workers' compensation coordinator. If we don't get that paperwork, we don't know what the restrictions are. We don't know what the employee can or can't do. Now, at this point, we have to be a little bit careful, not a little bit, a lot careful, about HIPAA considerations. This is medical information that may and probably is protected under HIPAA, and so we can't just spread this information around. You have the right to view this stuff when it comes to restrictions and the return to work paperwork, but don't spread it around the workplace. This is something between the supervisor and the workers' compensation coordinator and the employee that they use to come up with the appropriate job duties when restrictions are in place. This is a point to reassure the injured worker and say, you know what, we're sorry this happened. We're going to do everything we can to get you healthy and back to work as soon as we possibly can, and then sit down and create a plan. Get together with the supervisor and work comp coordinator, involve those people that are involved. Take a look at the restrictions and throw that up against the job description, the job duties that we have in there. If we don't have anything in the job duties that exceed those restrictions, that person can go back to work and do their regular task. If there are situations where the restrictions or where the job duties exceed the restrictions, then we have to modify the duty that employee can do. And it may be one simple task the employee is not able to perform, so we accommodate those restrictions. Okay, employee, you can't do this task, and we'll bring another employee in to do that. But everything else is within the restrictions. That's why this plan is important. Is so we're on the same page with everybody. It might be a normal job. It might be a transitional duty where we help them to come back to work. Monitor restriction compliance. What does that mean? Sometimes employees go beyond their restrictions. Oh, I'm all right. I can do this. Well, we need to monitor that and stop them from going beyond that, and also let them know that, hey, these restrictions are not only for the workplace. When they're under doctor's restrictions, that's for anything that they're doing outside of work, and just let them know that they need to keep those restrictions wherever they are. Can I discipline somebody who goes beyond their restrictions? Yes, you can, and I recommend that you do that. That's a great way to document what has transpired. We found this employee who had lifting restrictions, couldn't lift over 10 pounds, was lifting a 50-pound bag of something. We talked to the employee and disciplined them, let the adjusters know that was the case, but really work with the employee. Let them know how important keeping these restrictions are. Document milestones. I'll also have a sheet in the documents that we send out that's really a work comp milestone, and all it is a cover sheet to put on the file that you have for a work comp claim. You're like, oh no, I got to keep files. Yeah, you really want to keep track of these, because you can, especially in a complicated claim, you can end up with a mountain of paperwork. Put these in a file and just put those in chronological order. This sheet that I'll send out is a milestone on a date, this date the injury happened, and then you could have, every time they have a follow-up doctor's appointment and you put a piece of paper in there, this is what the doctor said, put that in the file and document that. So in just a few seconds, I can review the entire history of that claim and know where we're at. All right. And once again, document all the, everything as we go along. This next section in the Return to Work program is our commitment. So Utah Local Governments Trust will accommodate restricted duty jobs for workers injured on the job. The workers' comp coordinator will work with the supervisor to design a work strategy that meets the injured employee's restrictions and accomplishes our goals. It's basically just a commitment from us. We're going to do that, and that's really what we're looking for the TAP program, and to really cover the entire program of getting the person back. Okay, follow up. Supervisors, supervising the work comp coordinator should follow up with the worker. Number one, to let them know that they care. Particularly if somebody's off work, they probably feel pretty bad about themselves. Darn it, I'm not there. Everybody's doing my work because I'm out. Follow up with them on a regular basis. Give them a call and say, how are things? Give them a little update on what's going on. Let them know you care about them and to keep their restrictions and all those things. And also at that point, lets them know that you're paying attention to their recovery. So things are not really going to slip by you. You're watching what's happening. So lost time cases especially. But supervisors should be making regular follow-ups. So how are you coming on your restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Make sure that they're attending their doctor's appointments as well. All right. So here's one that that we've seen. Actually, this year has been kind of a bad one for this, where we've had some bad situations. We can run into dangerous situations anytime we take adverse employment action on an employee that is under workers' comp restrictions, or they're taken off of work. Don't fire somebody. Don't fire an employee that's on workers' compensation, and that's in bold. Now, can we do that? Yeah, there are cases when we have to do that, but we should only do that after we've had consultation with the adjusters. Once we terminate that employee, we lose all leverage that we have. We lose all control over this case. Sometimes it's a seasonal worker. So we've got somebody that's working in Parks and Recreation, and the end of the season comes up. They were injured just before, and they're off work. Well, we have a standard date, and all seasonal workers are terminated by this date. So we just fire that employee. Well, guess what? They're going to be off work, and sometimes these are students, college students or high school students who have had this injury. Guess what? You're going to keep paying them through the school year. Are they going to be in a big hurry to get better? Not at all, because I'm going to school and I'm getting 2/3 of my pay, which actually ends up being the same amount of pay that I'm getting. So in situations like this, we've got a seasonal worker, and the doc comes back. This person has restrictions. let's talk to that employee and say, okay, we can accommodate your restrictions. We'll have a job, and even if that means we keep somebody on longer than we would normally, yeah, this job will go on for a while. Well, what's the employee that's a student going to say? Well, I can't come back to work. I got to go to school. I quit. Once they quit, then we can in most cases stop those benefits. It's just a way that we kind of get into a trap sometimes, just by having a standard rigid way that we deal with employees. We need to open our eyes up to these things have consequences if we take this adverse action without thinking it through. So be really careful about that. Man, I've gone long, haven't I? Interaction with adjusters. So these guys are great. They do. You guys, I'm sure most of you have dealt with Connie and the other adjusters there. They do awesome work, but they need information from you. They need your cooperation there to make sure the message gets carried to the employee. They can only do so much over the phone. The groundwork is really involved with you. The daily interaction with the employee, and watching and verifying that they're keeping their restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. Know who your claims are. Know where they're coming from. We've got some great resources. If you'd like us to come present to your safety committee, we can talk about this, talk about your specific claims. We're happy to do so. And just to summarize, because I've got less than a minute left to be under an hour, have your policy. We'll send that out. Make sure people know that. Report injuries, immediate reporting, and within 24 hours get that out, get that called into the adjusters so we can get on that and be consistent with how we administer our programs. Direct your care. Report your injuries. Meet your restrictions. Commit to meet those restrictions. As you deal with employees that may have some challenges, like we talked about, don't go firing employees just as a standard practice. Let's think about the implications of that before we do it. Follow up and document on these. Okay. Here's some documents that we'll send out: the Return to Work program, work comp milestone tracker, Return to Work checklist, ideas for light duty jobs. We've got a whole list of those, and we'd welcome any suggestions that you have of what has worked really well for light duty positions, and then the incident reports and investigation forms. So quite a few documents that we'll send out. Just looking at the questions. Please go ahead and type your questions into the chat box if you have any right now. Doug, Brent, what have I forgot? I said a lot of words. Yep, they hit REM sleep.
Yeah, you didn't forget anything that I didn't forget anyway.
Okay.
That was pretty, I think that was pretty thorough.
Okay. Yeah, one more question in the Q&A box too.
Oh, okay, so good question here. What is the rule for retention of workers' comp records, and do the files have to be segregated from all other medical, i.e. respiratory protection, other non-medical incidents, or drug test results? This is a great question. These records are all confidential records that need to be kept, and generally the workers' compensation coordinator, so I'll just talk in generalities there, generally the workers' compensation coordinator is in human resources or is a designated loss or safety person, and so they already have those confidential records. They need to be locked up. Segregation, I would have all of my workers' compensation, and this is not by law or rule, unless somebody comes up with something that I'm unaware of. I would separate those from the other employee records, respiratory fit tests, and those things. Just so these are the claim records, because other people may have access to the fit tests or other things like that we don't want to have access to the work comp records. The retention, I'm going to punt on that one. I'm going to give our attorney a call on that one. I wouldn't throw these away, but I'm going to see what I can't remember. I know I knew this years ago, but you know, there's some dust up there cluttering up some of those neurons. I will talk to our work comp attorney on that, and I'll put that in the response when we send out the documents. Okay. All right. Just a question about the templates. Yeah, we'll send those out. So those will go out a little later, probably later in the day if we get the recording posted. We do that at the same time. Send the documents out. If you have questions on us, please give us a call. Doug, Brent, and myself are happy to walk you through. I know we talked about a lot of it. This document, this return to work program, is pretty darn simple. There are a few steps that you have to take. Designated, directing care, putting putting a instant reporting program in place if you don't have that, and then making the commitment to accommodate restrictions. Those are important things. Oh, and not over indemnifying, not making up the 1/3 on that pay. Those are some real simple actions that we can take today and immediately see some results in our workers' comp performance. And if you want to know your EMOD and those kind of things, send us an email or give us a phone call, and we're happy to help out with that. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. Doug, Brent, you got anything else to add? Is that the final word?
Nothing else.
Okay.
It's good.
All right. Thanks, folks. I appreciate your attendance. I apologize I went a little bit long, but this is a big subject. Give us a call if you've got a question. And without anything else, have a safe day.